Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. In this tutorial series, we are designing this header from scratch using HTML and CSS. And in the previous video, I showed you how to write the HTML of this design. Now in this video, we will add the CSS and make it look like this. So let's get started. This is the HTML of our design and this is how it looks right now. And we have already linked our CSS file over here. So here we can see we have this link and we have the style.css file linked over here. So let's head over to our CSS file and let's start styling this page. First of all, let's reset the margins and we will set the margin of the body to 0. So I'll just type body and I'll just set the margin to 0. And now we can see that we don't have the default margin of the body. Now the first thing we will do is we will style the nav container. So here we can see this is the nav container. If you go back to the HTML, we can see we have created this division with the class of nav container, and in that we have this nav element, and this should not end over here. So let's delete this from here, and it should end after these social media icons. So we will end it over here. Alright, here we have this nav element, and in that we have the logo and we have the menu items and also the social media icons. So let's style this. First of all, let's style this nav container division. So let's go back to our style.css file and let's type .nav container. And first of all, let's set the position to fixed so that it will always be at the top even if we scroll down or up. And let's set the top position to 0. And let's go back to our design. And let's also add a font family. So we're going to add a font called Roboto. So first of all, let's get the link of the font. You can just go over here to fonts.google.com and just search for the font. So we want to have the Roboto font, and I'll just click on this font. And we need to have two styles. We need to have the regular one. So I'll just select this regular 400 from here. And we also need to have the bold version. So I'll just select black version from here. And let's copy this link from here. And we'll just paste it inside our HTML head section. So here in this head section, I'll just paste the link. Right now, let's go back to our style.css file and we'll just type font family and we'll just set the font to Roboto and sans serif. Right now, let's style the nav inside the nav container. So I'll just type nav container nav and let's set a background color of 293241. And here we can see our nav. We'll set the width of this to 1200 pixels. So I'll just type max width and we'll set it to 1200 pixels. And right now the width is not being added over here because we have set the position of this nav container to fixed. Now for the width to be applied, we have to set the left position to 0 and the right position to 0. And now we can see we have the width applied. And we'll also bring it to the center. So I'll just type margin 0 for top and bottom and auto for left and right. Now here we can see we have this logo over here, and below that we have the menu items, and below that we have these icons. But we want all of them to be one next to the other. So for that we can set the display to flex. So here I'll just type display to flex. And now we can see all the elements are one next to the other. Now we want the logo to be on the extreme left and all these elements to be on this right corner. So for that we can use a property called justify content and set it to space between. And now we can see we have the logo over here at the left and we have the menu items at the center. And then we have the icons at the right corner. But we want these menu items and also these icons to be together at the right. So here we can see in our design we have all of them at the right corner. So let's go back to our HTML and here we can see we have created a division with the class of menu items. And then we have this division with the class of social. So I'll just cut this social division from here. And I'll just paste it inside this menu items division. And now we can see that the logo is on the left and all these elements are on the right. Right now let's add some more styles. So let's go back to our style.css file and I'll just add some padding. So I'll just set a padding of 4 pixels top and bottom, and I'll just set a padding of 48 pixels for left and right. Now we also need to have a box shadow at the bottom, and we also need to have rounded corners over here at the bottom left and at the bottom right. So let's type box shadow and we'll set the values to 0, 4 pixels, 8 pixels, negative 4 pixels, RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.4. And let's set the border radius for rounded corners. and we'll set it to 0 0 for the top corners, and for bottom left and bottom right we'll just type 20 pixels 20 pixels. And now if you go back to our design, we can see that we have the rounded corners and we also have the box shadow. Right now let's style this logo. So here I'll just type nav container nav logo, because here we can see in the HTML we have this division with the class of logo, and in that we have the logo. So let's set the font size to 30 pixels, and we'll set the font weight to 900, and we'll set the color of the text to F8 F9 FA, and here we can see we have the logo. Now we want this logo to be at the center vertically. So for that, let's go over here to the nav element, and here we'll also add one more property called align items to the center, and now we can see it is in the center vertically. Right now let's style these elements on the right. So here let's type nav container, and if you go back to the HTML, here we can see we have this division with the class of menu items. So let's target that. So you'll just type menu items, and here we can see we have these elements one below the other. We want them to be one next to the other, so let's set the display to flex, and we'll also align it to the center, and now we can see that they are one next to the other. Right now let's style these menu items. So here we'll just type nav container menu items, and we'll target the anchor tag. So here I'll just type greater than a. Now we are using this selector over here because if you go back to the HTML, here we can see we have these anchor tags over here, but we also have the anchor tags inside the social division. Now we don't want to select these anchor tags, we just want to select the anchor tags inside the menu items. So for that we have to use this greater than selector over here, so it will select just the anchor tags over here. It won't select the other anchor tags which is inside the other divisions. So let's go over here and let's add some styles over here. First of all, let's set the color of the text to this light color, and we'll also add some margin between these menu items. So let's type margin, and we'll set it to 0 for top and bottom and 24 pixels for left and right. And we'll also remove the underlines by typing text decoration to none. Right now when we hover over these elements, we want to have an underline. So here we can see when we hover over this, we have this underline over here below these menu items. For that we're going to use an after selector. So let's go over here and let's type nav container menu items a colon hover colon colon after, and in the after we need to have a content property. So let's type content. Now if we type something over here like 1 2 3, and here we can see when we hover over these elements we have 1 2 3 written. So the after selector is used to add some extra content to the elements. Now we don't want to have 1 2 3 written over here, we want to have an underline. So let's go back over here and I'll just delete 1 2 3 from here, and let's add an underline over here. So we'll set the position of the underline relative to the anchor tag. So for that, here in the anchor tag we need to have position, and we'll set it to relative, and here we need to set the position to absolute. And now for the underline we'll just have a height of 4 pixels, and for the width we will set it to 100% of the element, and we'll set the background color to the light color, and we'll set the bottom position to negative 13 pixels. This is what I calculated. And now let's go over here and hover over these menu items, and we can see that we have the underlines, but we also have to set the left position to 0. So let's go back over here and we will set the left position to 0, and now we can see we have the underlines when we hover over these menu items. Right now let's style these icons. Right now for the icons we have this division with a class of social, so let's target that. So here I'll just type nav container social, and we will set the background color to C1F DFF, and we'll also set a padding of 4 pixels top and bottom and 16 pixels left and right, and we'll also have a border radius for rounded corners. So I'll just type border radius of 20 pixels. Right now these icons are not exactly in the center of the container division, so for that we have to add a property called vertical align to the image. So let's type nav container social img, and we'll just type vertical align, and we'll set it to middle. Now it is exactly in the center. Now when we hover over these images we need to increase the size of the image. So let's add a hover effect over here. So I'll just type nav container social img colon hover, and we'll just set the transform scale, and we'll set it to 1.1. And now we can see that the images are changing size when we hover over them. You can also add a smooth transition to the animation. So here we can just type transition and we can set it to all 500 milliseconds. And now if you hover over this, we have the smooth transition. Right now let's target the anchor tags and let's set some margin between these different icons. So let's type nav container social A for the anchor tag. And if you go back to the index.html file, here we can see we have these anchor tags and in that we have the images. So for the anchor tags, we will set a margin of 0 for top and bottom and 16 pixels for left and right. And now we can see we have this gap between these images. And let's also remove these underlines from these images. So for that you can just type text decoration and we'll set it to none. And now we don't have the underlines. Alright, that's it with the navigation menu. Now the next thing we're going to style is the header wrapper. So for the header wrapper we need to have this linear gradient background color. So if you go back to the HTML, here we can see we have this division with the class of header wrapper, and in that we have all the elements inside the header. And let's target that over here in the CSS. So here I'll just type header and here we'll just type header wrapper. And we need to add the background color that we have over here. Now there's a website that generates different kinds of backgrounds. So you can use this website called cssgradient.io and just go to this option called backgrounds. And here you can see there are a lot of different gradients that you can select from, and you can just copy the CSS from here and add it to your CSS. You have different options over here. You have UI gradients, you have gradient, you also have gradient hunt and web gradients. So if you want to have this color, you can just click on this button called copy gradient code, and the CSS will be copied. You can just paste it in your CSS. Now I'll just paste the code that I generated from this website. This is the code that I generated, and if you go back to our website, we can see we have this background color. Alright, now let's style the elements inside the header wrapper. So if you go back to the HTML, here we can see inside the header wrapper we have this header with a class of my header, and in that we have the text content and we also have the image. Now we want both these elements to be one next to the other, so here we can add display of flex to this my header. So let's go back to our CSS and here we'll just type my header and we'll just set the display to flex, and we'll also align it to the center vertically and justify content to space between, because we want the text content to be on the extreme left and the image to be on the extreme right. So here we have the my header division. Now we want to set a fixed width for this my header. So let's give it a maximum width of 1100 pixels, and we'll also bring it to the center. So we'll just type margin 0 auto, and we'll also set a font family of Roboto and set the height to 100 viewport height. Right now let's style this heading. So for the heading we have an h1. Here we can see we have this h1. So let's target that. I'll just type my header h1 and we'll set the font size to 65 pixels, and we'll just set the font weight to 900. And we don't want to have any margins, so I'll just type margin 0. Right now let's target this subheading. So if you go back to the HTML, we have a division with the class of subheading, and in that we have these paragraphs. So let's target the subheading division first. So I'll just type my header subheading, and for the subheading we will have a background color of 073B4C. And let's also add a padding of 18 pixels top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. And we'll also set a margin of 24 pixels top and bottom and 0 for left and right. And we'll also have a border radius of 20 pixels. And for the h1 we need to change the color of the text. So here we just type color and we'll set the color to E0FBFC. Right now let's style these paragraphs inside the subheading. So let's type my header subheading P, and we'll set the font size to 18 pixels, and we'll set the color of the text to E0FBFC. Right now let's style these buttons. So for the button we have a class called btn. So let's target that. I'll just type my header btn. and we'll just remove the underlines by typing text decoration to none, and we'll set a background color of E0FBFC, and we'll also add a padding of 12 pixels top and bottom and 30 pixels left and right. And let's also add border radius, and we'll set it to 30 pixels, and let's set the font weight to 900, and we'll also set the color of the text to 07B4C. Now let's set the display of these buttons to inline block, because anchor tags are by default display of inline, so we may have some problems of margin and padding. So it is always a good idea to set the display of the anchor tags, which are buttons, to inline block. And let's set a margin top of 8 pixels and margin right of 20 pixels. Right, now let's also add some box shadow. So let's type box shadow, and we'll set the values to 0, 4 pixels, 24 pixels, negative 8 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0 and 0.3. And now we can see we have these shadows for the button. Now when you hover over these buttons, we need to increase the size of these buttons. So for that, let's add a hover effect. So I'll just type my header btn:hover, and we'll set the transform scale, and we'll set it to 1.1, and we'll also add a smooth transition. So I'll just type transition and set it to all 500 milliseconds. And now when you hover over this, we have these hover effects. Right, now the last thing we need to style is this image. So let's go back to our HTML, and here we can see we have this division with the class of image, and in that we have the img tag. So let's go back over here, and let's type my header image img, and we'll set the height of the image to 600 pixels. Now here we can see that the image is not positioned correctly. It should be at the bottom of the screen. So for that, we have to target the container division, which is the image, and let's type my header image, and we have set the display to flex for this my header over here. So for this my header, we have set the display to flex, and we also have aligned it to the center. So here we can see we have the text content and also the image, and both of them are aligned in the center vertically. So that's why this image is in the center of the screen. Now we have to set the alignment of the image to flex end. So let's type align self, and we'll set it to flex end. And now we can see that the image is at the bottom, but we have a little bit of gap between the image and the bottom. So for that, we have to add a property called vertical align and set it to middle. And now we can see everything looks alright. Now the last thing we need to do is add this background shape over here. So for that, we have this division with the class of image bg, and let's style that in our CSS. So here we'll just type my header image bg. Now we have to set the position of this image bg relative to the image division. So here for the image division, we'll set the position to relative, and here in the image bg, we will set the position to absolute, and we'll set a height of 500 pixels and a width of 430 pixels, and let's set a background color of RGBA 255, 255, 255 and 0.9 for the opacity, and let's set the left position to negative 14 pixels and the top position to 22 pixels. Now you can just experiment with these left and top positions and also the height and the width to get the desired look for you. Now this is how it looks right now. Now the image should be at the top of this shape. So for the image, we need to have a Z index, and we need to set it to, let's say, 100. And now still the image is not at the top. So for that, we also have to set the position to relative, because we have a position of absolute for this image bg, so we have to set some position over here for the image as well. And now we can see we have the image at the top. Now we also need to add some border radius, and we also need to rotate it a little bit. So let's do that. So here I'll just type transform rotate z, and we'll set it to 5 degrees, and we'll also add a border radius of 20 pixels. And now we can see that we have the background shape at the correct position. Now in our original design, we have less width for this nav container, and we also have a little bit of margin top for this h1. So let's go back to the h1 and let's set a margin top of 50 pixels. And now here for the nav container, if you right click over here and go to inspect, and if we hover over this nav element, we can see that we have a width of 1296. But if you go back to the CSS and if you go to the nav, here we can see we have set a width of 1200 pixels, but we have a lot more width in our design. Now the reason for that is that we have added this padding over here as well, so it is added to the width of the element. Now if you don't want that to happen, you can add a property called box sizing and set it to border box. And now if we right click over here and go to inspect, and if we inspect the nav, we can see that we have the exact width of 1200 pixels. So you can set the box sizing to border box if you want to have the exact width. So that's basically it with the design of the desktop version. Now in the next video, I'll show you how to design the mobile version of this design, and we'll also have a different mobile navigation menu for that. So we'll basically make some changes in this design and make it look good on a mobile device. So that's it for this video. If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below, and if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.